Welcome to Mobile Developer Day. I personally learned something new today, that Doug wants to be Cary Grant. Personally, I figured he was kind of a Johnny Cash kind of guy, but that's cool. Cary Grant's good too. So yeah, my name is Constantine, and I'm a product manager on the developer experience team here at Facebook. So what that means is our team focuses on building products and features specifically to help developers like you guys onboard onto the Facebook platform, use the Facebook channels to build really rich, engaging, kind of great social apps, kind of like SongPop that Doug was talking about. And what we're going to be talking about today specifically is how you can use these social channels and these Facebook channels to grow installs and basically get more users, because more users is good, and we all like that. So we're going to talk about our strategy on Facebook. This is going to be kind of reinforcing the build, distribute, and promote steps that Doug just talked about. We're going to talk about getting started with the social channels. So we're going to give you an overview of some of the channels that you can use to get, again, these great features and drive growth and distribution. This isn't going to be kind of an exhaustive overview of everything that you can do on Facebook. Rather, we're going to focus on a couple of specific channels that you can use to drive installs. Next, we're going to talk about App Center. Again, App Center is a really cool way, again, where you can get distribution, you can get your page listed, and you can get kind of cross-platform distribution across Android, iOS, and the web, including mobile web. We're going to talk about a new product called Mobile App Install Ads. I'll be spending quite a bit of time on this specifically. It's something that's really cool. We launched pretty recently. We're seeing great results from it, and I think you guys are going to be pretty excited about. And then finally, we're going to talk about Open Graph. And here we're going to give an overview of what Open Graph is. We're kind of going to level set everybody that maybe not be familiar with the product. And then later today in our advanced talks, we're going to be showing you guys how you can build Open Graph directly into your apps. So let's get started. Your strategy on Facebook. So Doug gave a bunch of numbers. This talk is not going to be quite so metric-based. It's going to be mostly around how-tos and how to get started with this kind of stuff. But I want to call out this 600 million number just to let it kind of bake in a little bit. We have over 1 billion users on Facebook, and these are active users coming back every month, which is phenomenal, right? It's a ridiculous number. But importantly, 600 million of them are accessing Facebook on mobile devices. According to ComScore, they spend about 6.5 hours per month looking effectively at their newsfeed or interacting with Facebook. So it's just a ridiculous amount of mind share, right, of these people that are actually engaging with Facebook. And what we're talking about here is how you guys can get your content and show it to these users across these channels. So back to the steps. Building your app to be social at its core. It's pretty straightforward. Like the first step in any software project is you're going to be designing and building your app. What we want to kind of reinforce here is that you should be building it to be social by design, meaning that you're not tagging on a social feature at the end. Your app is primarily a single user experience, and then you put a share button at the end. While you can do that, and you will see growth from it, ideally what you want to look at it is kind of design it from the beginning to have a great social, compelling experience for your users. And so something where they're kind of effectively incentivized to share. I want to take these great moments they're having and have these enriching moments like Doug and Swain for SongPop. And so Charles is going to be talking directly after me and show you guys how to do this kind of stuff. Next, we want to talk about distributing your app. And so this basically, once you have your great social experience, you've baked it into your app, you've now deployed it across Apple iOS or Google Play, or the mobile web for that matter. Users are going to be interacting with this stuff. They're going to be sharing this content through Facebook. And then as a result, you're going to be getting installs through that step. And then the last thing I want to talk about is promote. Once you have these stories out in the wild, you have users using your products and sharing this content, you can effectively promote this content by first taking a look at our insights and analytics, see which stories are doing well, and then what you can do is promote this content to kind of double down on that investment. And really what I want to kind of drive home here is that by promoting these stories, you're effectively turning up the volume on them, right? When somebody shares a story, it's going to go out to some subset of their friends. You can promote it and kind of boost the distribution and give it a little bit more juice and get more bang for your buck. And ideally, what you want to do here is find the stories, again, that people are already interacting with, liking, commenting on things that they like, and again, promote it to get the most out of it. So let's talk about placement on Facebook. This shouldn't be news, actually, to anybody here, but I want to kind of go through and level set everybody. The first thing is newsfeed. So everybody should be familiar with newsfeed. This is something what you see when you come onto Facebook.com. It's what you're going to see when you load the mobile app, again, both on iOS or on Android. And really what we're going to be showcasing here is this is where stories show up. When people share content from your app, it shows up in newsfeed. If you purchase mobile app install ads, they show up in newsfeed. And this is where we're saying, again, that we have these 600 million users, and they spend over 6 hours per month looking at this thing. This is where you want to be, and this is where you want your content to show up. Next, there's timeline. Everybody's familiar with timeline, right? Raise your hands. Everybody's still asleep. That's cool. So am I. All right, good. So timeline is kind of like the next iteration of profile, right? This is the digital representation of yourself on the web or on Facebook. This represents everything that you've been that you want to share publicly from the day that you were born to who you are today. So these are the stories, open graph actions that we'll talk about later today, and basically the way that I interact with the world and the version of myself that I want to portray to people. That's timeline. And again, you want to have your content on here because now what you're doing is capitalizing on these great experiences people are doing with their app and making it part of their identity, right? It becomes part of their self and who they want to showcase themselves as. And then finally, App Center. App Center should be pretty straightforward. You can think of it almost as a directory, again, for social apps. This is a single place that users can go to find and get information about interesting social apps that they might want to interface with. Again, it's available both on desktop web and on mobile, and it interoperates between the two. So a user can find your app, for example, when they're on the web, and then actually use it in their mobile device. And then the last thing I want to kind of drive home here is why promote. I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but what I want to kind of specify here is that you shouldn't necessarily see the organic channels, and that would be something like sharing a story versus promotion as two mutually exclusive things. Rather, they're complementary. And again, as we said before, what you're doing here is when a user shares that content, and they're sharing effectively content to their friends, and you're doing it on their behalf through the Facebook channels. By promoting, you can basically, again, turn up the volume, make sure that more people see it, more people get something out of that, and kind of drive the distribution and kind of push it forward. So let's talk about the social channels. Again, newsfeed, sharing a story is the first case. This is kind of the most simple, basic way that you can share stuff on Facebook. And really what you're doing is taking kind of an unstructured string, like hello world or something like that, and allowing a user to share it from your app and talk about what they're doing. Obviously, you can include an image, you can include a link. There's various other features within sharing a story. This should be reasonably straightforward. Actually, how many people have anybody integrated Facebook at all in your apps? Oh, wow, a lot of you guys. So this is old news, so I'm going to go by it pretty quick. So iOS, what does it take to share a story? Well, the first thing is that sharing a story in iOS is specifically extremely straightforward and really simple. The first thing with anything else, and this is kind of a mantra that we're going to drive home through the entirety of the day, is install the proper SDK. So in this case, the iOS SDK for Facebook. You want to install that in your app, make sure it's functioning, and from there it's going to unlock all of the functionality that we're talking about moving forward. For iOS 6 specifically, we have a native share dialog for Facebook where you can share content in an extremely lightweight, easy manner. So it's really straightforward, it's really simple, and the main thing I want to call out is you do not need to implement Facebook login. So this is quite literally code that you can copy and paste, wrap it in a button, and effectively people are sharing content. As you're looking through your build, promote, or build, distribute, promote steps, you start with this, the most basic implementation, and you keep kind of iterating on that process, and again, get to that great social by design experience that we're talking about. But this is the first step. You don't need to write this code down. We're going to be sharing it multiple times during the day. And again, it's available on the developer site, but this gives you an example of how simple it is. How many of you guys are Objective-C developers? A lot? Awesome. So this is straightforward, right? You're basically instantiating this dialog. It'll pop that thing up over there. And from here, users can really easily share stuff directly to their friends. For mobile web, it's also really straightforward and really simple. You'll basically include the JavaScript SDK, which again will give you some of this functionality. You can use the Facebook feed dialog, which is a similar piece of functionality to what we saw in iOS 6. And you can use this to share content or allow users to share content on their behalf. And again, no need to do Facebook login. It's really straightforward. Again, here's an example. It's actually even shorter amount of code than it is in iOS 6. But really what we're looking at the bottom there is that fb.ui call. And that pops up a feed dialog that you'll see on the right. So again, it's really straightforward. It's really easy to use. There's no need to do login just yet. If you're just getting started, this is where you should be at. For Android, we're basically working to get to a point here as well. But right now, iOS 6 and the mobile SDKs are the easiest way, or I'm sorry, the JavaScript SDKs are the easiest way to get this stuff done. So next up is requests. Who knows about requests? Okay, that's actually more than I thought too. What requests are is that it's that piece of functionality that Doug was talking about with SongPop, where he can invite his friend who does not have the actual app installed, will get a push notification, all that kind of stuff. And that's really what we want to drive home, is that what a request is it's a one-to-one communication channel between two users, a sender and a recipient. So for example, I could send you a request or up to 50 other people a request. And this is going to be a private communication that my friends won't see. It's a directed message effectively from me to you. When I do that, what ends up happening is you'll get a Facebook notification both on the native clients and on the web. And you'll also get a push notification on the user's phone if your app supports that platform. So for example, I'm playing Song Pop. Yeah, there's a native client for iOS. There's one for Android. There's potentially one for maybe the mobile web and also for the desktop. When I send an invite to one of my friends, they'll be notified across all of these platforms, and effectively the ones that they support, the ones that they use, and can use this push notification to actually go into the store and actually download the proper app. And so why this is really cool is, again, you're kind of proxying these push notifications over our channel, over Facebook. And so you can get the effectively distribution on the other people's phones and notify them about it without you actually needing to do anything there at all. What it takes to get this, well, let's actually walk through this flow. You'll see on the left here, this is what we call the friend picker, or also referred to as an MFS. This is basically a UI that we support and we offer that allows a user to select the friends that they want to send this to. And so from here, for example, I'm typing in Chris to get to Christine. I can see her name in the type ahead. I click that. It's going to send a request to Christine, which results in a push notification on her phone. When she opens up that push notification, it's going to take her, in this case, to the Apple App Store, where she can download the app and get started. And so what does it take to do it? Again, excuse me. You're going to install the platform SDK. So the iOS SDK, the JavaScript SDK, the Android SDK. Make sure that's functioning within your app. The next thing is that you do need to implement Facebook login in this case, because what you're doing again now is you're sending a request. Effectively, you're communicating on the user's behalf. So we need to make sure to authorize the user and that they gave you permission to actually do this. So login is the next step. And then finally, you're going to use the request dialog. And this is going to be native across the different SDK that you're using to actually send the request and then result in this push notification, Facebook notification, everything else. There's a number of how-tos and guides for how to do this stuff. Both for iOS 6 and for Android. You can find them on our developer site, developers.facebook.com. Again, you don't need to copy these things down. I'm going to show a resource slide at the end where you can get all this information. But again, if we're kind of going through a logical progression, you start with sharing stories. That's easy. You move on to sending requests. It's extremely powerful. This is how you invite people. And then as you get forward, we'll continue to go through this list. So App Center. Is anybody in App Center? I like asking questions, clearly. OK, awesome. So there's probably about half of you guys that are already in App Center today. Ideally, we'd like to get the rest of you guys in App Center as well, since it's driving a great amount of growth. It's one of the primary install drivers of installs on Facebook today. And actually, most interesting about App Center is that we're finding that users that install apps through Facebook are 40% more likely to come back to that app install or to that app the next day, and 21% more likely to come back to that app within a week. So not only are people basically getting a tremendous amount of installs through App Center, they're getting users that are actually have high intent, that are actively engaged in this content and want to come back rather than just clicking the button and forgetting about it. So I'm going to show this awesome slide again with the lightning that Doug had. The animation is pretty slick. Really what we want to kind of point out here is that through Facebook, again, we're driving distribution across various platforms, basically all the platforms that you're kind of developing on today. We don't necessarily need to harp on this. You guys, I think, are starting to get the message. It's not a case of iOS or Facebook. It's a case of iOS and Facebook, right? You should include the platform SDK. You should use the functionality. We're going to grow basically your app by giving you distribution. And this is what App Center looks like. Again, it's available both on the website and it's available on a mobile phone. But let's talk about specifically how this works for you guys being mobile app developers. So for example, I might be on my desktop PC. I'm sitting around waiting to catch my shuttle to go home, and I'm looking for a great mobile app, something to keep me entertained on the shuttle while I'm on my way back. And I noticed something like Stitcher, for example. And Stitcher being, it's a great mobile app. It lets me basically listen to talk radio on demand and lets me queue up things that I want to check out. So this looks interesting. I want to check it out. But I'm not catching the shuttle for another 30 minutes, and I might forget about it. So I have this button on the top right that says Send to Mobile. When I click that button, what's going to end up happening now is that we're going to authorize the user to use Stitcher. So at this point, we're already doing kind of the install process for the user to use Stitcher and Stitcher to pull personal information for the user from Facebook. Next thing that we're going to do is we send a push notification to my phone, kind of to remind me again that Stitcher is now ready to be installed. So when I leave my desk, when I forget about this and I open up my phone on the shuttle, I'm going to have this push notification right here that I can open up, which will take me directly to the App Store. And what's really slick about this, aside from just redirecting me to the App Store, is that when I click the Install button here, it shows up on my phone. I actually run the application. We've already taken them through the authorization process through App Center. So what can happen now is as soon as I launch Stitcher Radio, it's going to present me a personalized experience right off the bat. I don't actually need to type in my password or do login or anything like that on Stitcher. App Center basically helped me complete that flow. And so with a couple of clicks, effectively 3, I now have Stitcher. It's personalized. I found it in the App Center. It's driving installs, and it's pretty slick. And then, of course, you can also get to the App Center on your mobile device. So when I finished with Stitcher, I wanted to find something else. I can go back to the App Center on my device, start browsing and getting recommendations, see what my friends are using, stuff like that. And as a result, drive more distribution to new apps. So to get into the App Center, again, start with the SDK. You need to have that installed to get any kind of Facebook functionality we're talking about. Next, you need to do login. And so login, again, is required in order to complete this kind of loop and get that social experience and personalized experience the first time that the user actually installs the app. You want to comply with the App Center guidelines. These are pretty straightforward. You can find them, again, on the developer site. What these look like are basically you have to make sure your images are square and your copy looks good and things like that. It's pretty straightforward. And then finally, you're going to submit and go through a review process. As a result of doing this, you're going to take those assets, you'll submit them to our team, we'll take a look. If everything looks good, we approve you, and you'll start getting distribution again and listing on the App Center. So it's pretty straightforward. Again, assuming you're going through this logical progression, it's pretty easy to get in here once you've already done the login step. That's probably the biggest hurdle of all. And so what does it look like? Well, with everything that you're going to be doing on Facebook platform, you're going to go through the app dashboard. And this is kind of the central configuration utility that you're going to use to register your apps with Facebook. This is what it looks like. And so this is the basic settings page for the app dashboard. I'm going to give my app a display name, maybe a contact email. Then I'm going to tell Facebook how I'm integrating or what platforms I support. So in this case, we're going to use iOS. We're going to give us a bundle ID, the App Store IDs, and basically we're going to check that we use Facebook login, these being the requirements for App Center. Again, we need this information so we can link you directly to the Apple App Store. So that's why you're filling it in here. Following that, you're going to go to the app details page, which is basically a form where you can upload your assets. If you guys have already submitted for Google Play or for the Apple App Store, this is pretty straightforward. It's a very similar process. You give us a description. You tell us what category you're in. Again, this is going to dictate where you show up in App Center. You tell us which platforms are listed you want to have listed for App Center. Why this is important is you want to consider when you tell us the integrations on that first page, those are the integrations that you're hooking up the SDKs for and actually working to develop. If you have something in development for this app ID that's not ready to go to prime time yet, or maybe you just don't want to drive distribution to it, like your mobile web app or something like that, you can turn it off here. And so that's what this setting gauges, is like which things do we want to show up in App Center, specifically what do we want to drive traffic to. Next, you're going to fill out your icons and your banners. Again, pretty straightforward stuff. You can't see it on this screenshot, but another neat feature we have is that we require 3 screenshots per platform that you support. And so that's what's going to show up in your app details page. There's an import button in that process. So if you're already in iTunes Connect or you're in Google Play, you can press the import button. We'll grab your assets from there, and you don't have to re-upload them. So it's just a nice convenience and quality of life feature. And then finally, from here, you're going to go through the submission process. You can preview your assets. So by hitting any of these buttons, you can preview what it looks like, make sure everything looks good before you submit it into review, and then submit the app. The other thing that I want to call out, which isn't in these slides, is that we also support localization. So for example, if you're big in Brazil or Taiwan or something like that, and you want to have a localized version of your app details page, you can do all that stuff as well from here. There's a localized tab where you can fill that out, make that part of your submission, and then submit it and get it reviewed for the App Center. And so here's a bunch of logos. There's a bunch of really cool apps that are already in the App Center today. It sounds like you guys are some of the people here. So again, App Center is doing really well. We're driving a lot of installs. We're really happy about this product. And given, as you move through and become more integrated with the Facebook platform, it's kind of a gimme. Like just get your app listed within the App Center and get the distribution as a result. So next I want to talk about mobile app install ads. It's kind of a mouthful of a product name, but at least it's clear about what it does. Do you guys know what this is? Yes? Are you tired of me asking questions? Yes? All right, moving forward. So I want to spend a bunch of time talking about it. It's a new feature that we rolled out reasonably recently. What this allows you to do is basically take the content that we talked about in App Center, like again, your great promotional art, your details, stuff like that, and put that in people's newsfeed. From there, they'll see this unit. They can click it. It's going to take them to the iOS App Store, or it's going to take them to Google Play where they can install the app. So basically, again, now we're getting to the promote phase of this whole talk. And what you can do is take that great content from App Center, put it in somebody's feed, and then start showing it to them and getting installs directly as a result of your promotion dollars. So this is what it looks like. You'll see the ad on top over here where it's for Tiny Village. Again, in this case, we took their cover image from App Center. We're showing the rating that they have in App Center. And we're also showing their app description, again, that we're getting from App Center. There's an Install Now button, and when you click it, we take you directly to Google Play. So it's really straightforward. There's no magic here. It's just a very cool feature and something you should take advantage of. To talk about promotion really quick again, when a user shares organic content, like I share a story within Facebook, for example, that's going to go out, and it's going to be shown to a subset of my friends based on a number of different criterion. So maybe the time of day. If I post something at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's probably more likely that some of my friends that might be in Japan might see it, but other ones in the US may not. And so what we can do by sponsoring a story, again, is turning up the volume and growing the distribution for this story. We can basically grow the full addressable set of the people that are going to see this content. This also applies for these mobile app install ads. So we can target something very specifically to just my friends or something like that, or we can target to the full set of 1 billion users, which gets onto the next point in terms of targeting. Targeting is probably one of the coolest things about the ad platform on Facebook in terms of how discrete that this can be. You can basically create a set of users and target specifically to the kinds of people that are effectively interested in installing your app. So you can target, for example, the 1 billion users, or you can target specifically women that are 35 that live in Mountain View and are single or whatever else. And don't tell my wife that I just said that. So we can target by age and gender. It's pretty straightforward. It's something you'd expect. We can talk about personal information, and so we can target, again, based on where somebody lives, what their birth date is, their education history, something like that. We can target by custom audiences, which is also a really slick feature. What this is if you're already doing your own lead gen, you're already collecting a set of users that are effectively potentially interested in your app. You have email addresses, you have Facebook IDs, you have phone numbers, anything like that. You can take that information. You can upload it as part of this ad buying process, and as a result, we'll target these ads specifically to these users. So obviously the intersection, given that we have 1 billion plus users, with the people that you're basically getting in your lead gen is probably reasonably high. You can tell us specifically we want these users. These are the people that we want to target to. So that's custom audiences. And then finally, social. This is pretty straightforward again. You can target people based on their likes, their friend connections, their activity, things like that. And so through all of this set of functionality, what you can do is identify the set of users that are interested in your apps, and again, make it more tightly coupled to who you're showing these content to. If you're showing content to people that are not likely to install your app, then effectively you're just wasting your time. You want to show up to specifically the ones that are interested. So how do we do it? Again, we install the appropriate SDK. In this case, we're going to use iOS. We're going to add 1 line of code into our actual binary. And what this is going to do is effectively let Facebook know about the install event. And so this way we can kind of correlate it and optimize against getting you installs, which is exactly what we want to do here. We want you to register your app with Facebook. This is the same process as App Center. Basically, you're going to do the same thing over again. In fact, if you've already gone through App Center, you've already done this, and you can skip this step completely. Specifically for iOS, we need your bundle ID and your App Store IDs. For Android, we're going to need your package name, class name, and key hash. Now, what we're doing is we're actually optimizing this process to get the most finite set, the most limited set of information that we can to unlock this product for you. Right now, these are the requirements, but we're going to do everything we can to also make this a little bit more straightforward and even easier to use. Next, if you go to your summary page, and some of you guys in App Center probably already see this today, there's a Promote tab. And from in here, this just basically validates that you've done everything that you need to go, and you're already ready to start buying these mobile app install ads. And so if you see this in your summary page today, you can click this button, and it's going to take you directly to the Promote section where you can go through this flow. On the left-hand nav, you'll see the 2 different feeds that you can target, iOS or Android. These will show up depending on the platforms that you've integrated. So obviously, if you haven't integrated Android, you won't see the Android feed. You can review the ad. So this is going to give you an example of what we're getting, what the ad's going to look like based on your App Center submission. Next, you can choose your audience. From here, you can basically, these are kind of the most basic targeting demographics that you can enter. You can pick where they live or what country they're in, their age, their gender, things like that. You set your budget and your goal. You want to drive installs in this case. And then finally, you place your ad. And so again, this is kind of a streamlined process to onboard you guys really quickly and really easily to get growth out of this channel almost immediately. It's basically 4 steps, assuming you've already done App Center. It's really straightforward. If you're more interested in the more powerful kind of targeting things that we talked about earlier, Power Editor is how you're going to do it. This is kind of a more powerful and more complicated tool for running multiple campaigns. It's like serious marketing horsepower. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, this is where you go, but we definitely suggest you start with the promote screen first. If you're new to this whole process, that's where you want to go to just start getting value immediately. And as you become more familiar with these tools, you're going to end up in Power Editor, where you can run some pretty complicated stuff and really optimize in terms of how your installs are getting out. Of course, if you don't want to spend the time with Power Editor, you don't have an internal marketing team, this isn't something that you really want to invest in, we do have our PMD program, or our Preferred Marketing Developer program. This is a collection of a number of different companies that have significant expertise in these areas that we can introduce you to and get you connected with that can help you out through this process. And they can basically run and take care of managing these campaigns for you. And as a result, you don't need to waste your time on it. You can get these people to help you out and spend time really driving, again, installs. Meanwhile, you're focusing on building those great products and social experiences we talked about. From here, you can go through, you can select the specific thing that you're interested in. In our case, maybe we want mobile installs. We're not necessarily more as concerned about brand recognition. We can go through here, and as a result of completing this form, we'll get you introduced to the right people that can help you grow these apps. We also recommend that when you start basically setting up a relationship with them, you're going to have maybe monthly syncs. You're going to basically work together to make sure your goals are aligned, and they're helping you get the most out of your ads campaign on Facebook, again, to drive installs. And so finally, wrapping up with mobile app installs, we've been running a select beta with a couple of partners just to test this product out. There's some logos on the right there. And the early observations are pretty straightforward and pretty promising, right? People are excited about the massive reach. They're excited about the captive audience. Again, we talked about these 600 million users and the 6.5 hours that they spend on feed per month. They're excited about the increased engagement, CTRs, targeting. Basically, everything is full of win. So it's something worth checking out. All right. So we walked through sharing stories, the simple case. From there, we graduated onto sending invites, the more advanced case, again, to get these push notifications and get invites into your app. We talked about App Center, where you can get effectively free distribution and kind of a listing on the App Center to showcase your app and your app details. We talked about mobile app installs. Now we're going to talk about Open Graph. Has anybody worked on Open Graph? This is the last question, I promise. Oh, wow, lots of you guys. Awesome. So you guys are actually pretty familiar with this, which is great. I was going to do kind of a long talk about introducing what Open Graph is, but fortunately I don't have to spend a bunch of time on it. But to level set everybody, the way that we think of the graph in general is basically the relationship between peoples and objects. So I started out, for example, as a person, and I got a bunch of friends. And so each person in this case is a node within the graph. And the relationship between me and Doug, for example, is a friend. And so that would be the edge in this graph. The next thing we did was introduce the like button. And so now in the graph, we can represent objects. We can represent things like pages or brands or Starbucks. And I can like it. And this is now the edge that connects me, for example, to Starbucks and Doug to Starbucks. And now we also have a common relationship to Starbucks. And then last year at F8, we introduced the concept of the Open Graph, and specifically custom Open Graph, which basically allows you guys as developers to tell us what the relationship that your users have with your objects within your app. And so this basically builds out the graph so that we can model effectively all of the relationships that people have with pretty much everything. And as a result of this, we can show interesting stories. We can take this data and put it on people's timelines. And we can do some pretty powerful stuff in general with the Open Graph. So it's actually great that you guys are pretty involved. This should also not be news to you guys, but basically you use a single API to publish into the Open Graph. By doing so, and you can access this from native mobile clients, from the mobile web, from the desktop web, and you'll get distribution across all of these channels away. And the main thing here, again, is that this is a single API. So using, again, the Graph API, it's a RESTful web service. You post to that, you get distribution across everywhere. You can post to it from everywhere. It's kind of a cohesive, very simple single API you can use to interact with the Open Graph. What do stories look like? In this case, we have an example of a listen story. And so listen is a built-in type that we support. You can listen to songs. And as a result of that, we can create a more powerful story. So I don't know if you guys remember in the very beginning, I showed a story of me posting Hello World or something like that. It was pretty straightforward. In this case, we can do something a lot more powerful because we understand the relationship between the objects here. So Doug Purdy's, for example, listened to Transcendental Youth and a couple of songs. I can click on those, each specific song, and listen to that song directly. In the second case, we have my friend Colum that won a battle on worms. And again, there's more richer context and more metadata associated with the story, rather than just a simple sentence that says, yay, I won in worms. So Open Graph allows you to have more powerful stories in general. The next thing is that aggregations. So as a result, for example, I use Foursquare a lot. I'm a big fan of the product. I check into a bunch of places. Each check-in is going to result in a story, but most importantly on my timeline, we can show these reports or aggregations that take all of this information and kind of collect it and show patterns and identify patterns as a result. And so in this case, Foursquare created an aggregation that shows my top check-ins for any given month. So you'll see I check in at work a lot. Yeah. Anyways, moving forward. So what does it take to get Open Graph into your apps? You need to implement Facebook login. Again, we need to be able to authorize the user so that you can take action on Facebook on their behalf. And this is specifically giving you permission to write into the Open Graph on their behalf. You need a web server to host objects. This is probably the biggest thing that you guys want to be concerned about as mobile developers. For those of you that already have mobile web presence or a desktop web presence, you already have a web server somewhere where you can host these objects. And this is literally hosting the instance of whatever it is that you're connecting to, the restaurant I go to or something like that. If you have native clients only, this obviously step is a little bit more complicated. We'll be talking about some strategies around that later today in our advanced talks, but it's something to consider. And so if you're going through kind of the queue of ways to implement Facebook features and the channels we talked about, consider Open Graph to be like the advanced step. We've already gone through sharing stories, requests, App Center, things like that. Now we're ready to go really deep and build some really, really slick, basically engaging experiences, but there's some requirements as a result. That's Open Graph. The third one is the ability to make HTTP requests. This is kind of a no-brainer. You need to be able to talk to Facebook over HTTP. And then the last thing is that you go through the review process. This is similar to App Center. You configure basically your data model and your stories, and then you submit them into review, which will basically, we'll take a look. If everything looks good, we approve it, you're good to go, you start publishing. The last couple of things I want to talk about Open Graph are in terms of types. So the way you can think about Open Graph in general is kind of like an object-oriented type of methodology, right? Everything comes down to types effectively, and then instances when you're publishing the stories. So Facebook offers a couple of built-ins. So these are predefined types that you can use, and as a result, we have more context on them, and we can build special kinds of stories around them. Here's an example of some of the built-ins. Listen, for example, you can listen to songs. So when you start working with Open Graph, the first thing you want to look at is the built-in types available, and do any of these work for me? If they don't, you can get to custom Open Graph. And so this is actually a really powerful set of tools where you can define your own types for these things. For example, I wanted to create an action that says I can eat a food. Specifically, I want to eat a pizza or something to that effect. So I can model all this stuff, and we do offer the tools to do it. It's extremely powerful. As a result, it's also a little bit more complicated. So as you graduate through the process, this is where you're going to want to end up in terms of building really rich, engaging social experiences. And we're going to talk about this in the advanced talk later today. And then finally, if we want to wrap up the whole, again, build, distribute, promote. Building is creating your data model. Distributing is actually having your Open Graph implementation, your app, people sharing stories. And now we get to the promote section. As a result of people posting stories from your app, you're going to be able to get insights and analytics through our tools that show you which stories are effective and which ones are not. So some stories people might not be interested in, like me checking in at work. But people are super interested in me checking into a strip club. So as a result, that's probably a bad example. Moving forward. So as a result, what you can do is effectively sponsor these stories, which broadens the audience for these things. By doing so, you can show it to more people. You can get, again, more bang for your buck, more likes and comments on the story. And as a result, more people interacting with this stuff. Next steps. I've been kind of walking through this a number of times, but basically, again, here's how you start. First, you start with installing the platform SDK, iOS or Android or something like that. Once you've done that, you move on to publishing stories. From here, you can use the feed dialog or the iOS 6 native share dialog to publish stories really simply without implementing Facebook login. That's where you start. The next thing is you build out requests for invites. So you build in an invite mechanism into your app, and from here, you can allow people to invite their friends, get push notifications kind of tunneled across Facebook, and basically just get a lot of win as a result. Next, you want to go into App Center. So now you've basically ticked off the boxes for implementing the platform SDK and login. App Center should be basically a shoo-in. You just give us your assets, you submit the review, and you're finished with App Center. And then finally, what you want to do is work with mobile app install ads. And at this point, what you want to do is start purchasing these ads, and again, driving more distribution directly as a result of these mobile app install ads. The last thing is not on this slide is Open Graph. Again, this is kind of the advanced, super duper engaged experience, and we'll be talking about that in the talks later today. I promised a set of resources. Here they are. You guys can take a picture of this if you want. Write these things down. All of this information is available on the dev site, developers.facebook.com. We have guides for iOS and Android, for mobile web, and then specifically for things like App Center, Open Graph, and the mobile app install ad product. Otherwise, I should be all set. So thanks very much, you guys. And I think Doug's coming back up.